So it's a touchy subject. So down below on community posts, I believe it's the 20th today, July 20th, 2025. And I've subscribed to Eke Acres, E-K-E Acres, A-C-R-E-S on YouTube. And like, I know what I'm watching. I know that I'm watching somebody who's extremely small-minded, but I also see the humanity in him, and I like the transparency. And I also like a sort of down-home feeling that I get from him. But too late. So when you go back and you look at a lot of his videos, he's the kind of person who contends, it's Kevin, contends that he's using no hyperbole, no extravagant tapestry in the way that he constructs his videos or puts information out. Yet, when you look at all his videos, he does everything from Sasquatch sightings to loud noises to attacks, and he's doing what everyone else does. This isn't a judgment, even though it's coming off like that. This is not a judgment video on another channel or another person. It's to show that, you know, my depiction of that we're all like this huge, I would say almost infinite board of holes, right? You have this board, this wall of holes, and each of us have this slightly parallax view to one another, and we're all looking through that hole, and we see reality and swear we see reality just as it presents itself. The world is my idea, sort of thing, you know? And that's, you know, that's Kevin. Like, he's putting down this one channel, and oddly, this is exactly what I was thinking about with Kevin Eke Acres, is I was thinking, how do I keep sort of tolerating watching this guy? Because he sort of goes between this feel sorry for me attitude, look at me over here, almost like this childish sort of thing where he's waving his hands. And aren't we all doing that to some extent, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't get up in the morning and do anything. But for a man in his mid-50s, and even that is casting a broad assertion, he just seems extremely polarized. Yeah. So he's actually targeting other channels that, and this is where I really have an issue with him, but I'm still not going to unsubscribe, but I might get there because he's showing signs of being very fundamentalist. And you start to wonder, why am I servicing this person or giving them my subscription? And like a vote, every subscription counts. And I've promoted him a lot. I've put him up, even on my other channels. I've posted his stuff because I got something really heartwarming. But today it's a reminder that time, that sort of Marie Callender's Thomas Kincaid, if you know who that artist is, or, you know, similar Christmas picturesque ideological celebration. You now have to look at these pictures and these eras where there's like this time capsule, right? And say, look, this is not accurate. And you're choosing not to see all the abductions, all the murder, all the things that are happening around you. And most of his videos are done through drama, like Eke Acres Kevin. They're mostly done by pointing out drama situations, right? From camping and being assaulted by people to hearing loud noises and running off in the middle of the night. And I get that. be transparent with that, right? And I'll still watch them even now, for right now. Even with all that, there's a human quality of, it's not necessarily forgiveness, but it's kind of a treatise or an apologetic in the classical sense, right? But now, this most recent video he put out is he's putting down this person who is sort of uplifting this David Goggins-esque concept or idea. Straight up, life sucks. Embrace the suck. Well, as you probably know, I resonate very much with that. I mean, that's inadvertently what I've always talked about. You know, inadvertently, but quite overtly. Because there's always been the focus on nutrition or diet. And when I can, whether I've been out on the street, whether I've been in a Tesla, whether I've been housed, whether I've been unhoused, right? Whether I've been completely natural or juicing, whether I've been trying to hold another person's world up so that they could have a chance, right? I've always been campaigning for this life sucks and embrace it, right? You want to outrun it. And I think I really have, this is my own interpretation of what I have to offer, but I think I really have a firmer grip on this than the sensationalism that someone that's so extreme, like a David Goggins, or someone who's completely on the other side, that many would say he avoid becoming a cuck. That's the best description for Kevin. And in fact, it's so anomalous that he avoided becoming a cuck because he was chintzy, right? He talks about how he never took any credit out, how he only lived on the, and it's like, well, no woman would want to have anything to do with you because there's this, the drama and the exploitation and the fun and the diversion from what I'm talking about, that life sucks. And the best relationship, the longest lasting relationships, are people who scientifically, in my opinion, come together and formulate at a young age, you know, that life sucks. Or maybe they come together older. And I mean, you could have a dishwasher and a marine biologist come together and have very similar philosophies, you know, but the whole purpose for that is the fact that there is such, when we talk about polarization, there is such a gap in what is acceptable. If a man has any sort of promise or shows any sort of signs of intellect and intelligence, right, and doesn't sort of slip into the back burners, well, he's like the one that you roast at the party, right? And Trump uses this as a sympathizing notion when that's not really happening at all. He's a despicable person, but this is very important, is that the people who embrace suckology, life sucks, embrace it, right? Once they extend themselves and buy into other people's disharmony and try to assist other people, that's when they're being brought down in an undertow, while all the while they didn't see the eagle coming out of the sky to scoop them up, and all of a sudden they're looking up and the person that you went in to save just stole your ride. And that's a perfect depiction, you know, because as you know, I very much get into the astral theological aspects of it, but how that's been manipulated. Like, I love listening to Crow 777, CRROW 777, because like he had somebody on a few years back, Michael something or other, and I put that down below on a community post, and he's talking about, he didn't cut anyone off, but he's made this point before in past episodes where we don't know the true calendric zodiacal time. We don't know what we are, but there's always been this depiction of Scorpio being this very dark sign, right? And that it's very heavily equated with, like, even that the equinox is a misnomer. It's postulated and postured to throw us off so that we kind of look at the seasons in a specific way, right? But even more so, that even that, like, this dark night of the soul is actually a rebirth and a new beginning, right? The scorpion and the sign of Scorpio actually isn't the scorpion. That's what's being done to it. The scorpion is actually being depicted as the eagle, and you couldn't get more antithetical to a scorpion at that point, right? That an affliction is actually being done there. So we're going to pull this back in to the original conversation. As I start to walk, I feel a little bit lightheaded sometimes, right? But we're doing this. We're championing through. So this whole embracement of life sucks, make the best of it, really is about, you have to get into narrow gauge thinking. And if somebody has been so protected and then they become militarized, they're not going to see things the same way as somebody who has had nothing, had to earn every scrap they have, had a big heart, and sacrificed their own personal success and gain for others to remain alive, and that love is a transcendent aspect to this. If people don't get that fundamental aspect, and that's why I can listen to Eek Akers, and I can also understand where it seems like a really hardcore Stoic sentiment, but in fact it's not. And you want to stay away from the Stoicism, even though Stoicism seems to have some really viable traits. It is not the answer. It is too syllogistic. There are too many required non-secular breaks to be able to fork off into an individuation. In other words, you're always in control, and what you can't control, you essentially, and this is the truth, because life works much more randomly than the Stoic could allow, right? They're working on the railroad. They accept it. They accept their plight. But interdimensionally, those principles don't apply. They couldn't instantly be transposed into another dimensional zone, right? So this is where this militia or this military thinking is very inadequate, because there is, in fact, spiritual warfare occurring. And that is where the battlefield, like Joyce Myers has that one thing, right? Even though she's a redheaded witch flying around and stealing people's money. And it's amazing that people like that have been subsidized all these years, even after being exposed, found out, discovered. And you want to know why? Because just like Trump, they made other people rich, right? By exploiting and taking advantage of other people. And when they really think that, wow, the biggest scam in history, our own modern day history, is taxes, that we don't owe them, that the rich, the ultra rich, get these tax breaks, and that they're able to write everything off and actually take money. They're actually taking money back, right? And this is something that Bernie Madoff, you know, he was looking over this, and he didn't fuck up in any other way but coming clean to a hierarchy and cutting in Uncle Sam on the scam, right? If he would have cut people in, if Bernie Madoff would have cut Uncle Sam in on the scam and allowed the veneer to assume as legitimized, he wouldn't have been made an example of, right? If Wesley Snipes played ball, he would be extremely rich right now. He wouldn't have gone and served any sort of prison time. And there was no cause that the U.S. had to put him in prison in the first place, because there are no true tax laws. It's accepted common law that he got busted on. It's the people. The people were so indoctrinated. And that brings me back around to Kevin and Eke Akers, because it's like he accepts the value and the connotation of his religious dogma. And so at the end of the day, I find him extremely dogmatic. And here he is going through all this. He had kidney cancer and had a kidney removed. And then he creates all this hyperbole of peeing out blood, and he doesn't know what's wrong. And then he's getting all these subscribers because people feel bad for him. And then the next thing you know, his videos are heavily polarized and skewed toward an ideology that that most people don't agree with, right? Where's the soft fluff? Where's the flux? Where's the flow? Where's the ebb, right? And I've thought about all this, and I've thought about and lived by way of the antithetical of what he seems to represent, right? Like, how do you become better? How do you become more? How do you preserve yourself, right? And there just seems to be a deficiency. Just like with nutrients, there's a deficiency there. There's an absence, there's a void. And you're reminded of why we go through life in the first place and why life sucks. It's because people like that, they get more and more money, they want their money, and then they want to pretend that they don't care about the money and they would just help people out. Well, you get bored doing that after a while. And at the same time, I'm not judging him, but I'm seeing Kevin's nice flashy glasses and how he's already got a defense line, because that's the household he was probably raised in. He's got these nice fancy glasses up on his head. You never really saw him doing that, right? And yeah, he'd fire back and say, "Oh, these were only blah blah blah," and I got these, and you're not. And it's like, no, I see people like you every day trying to take a little piece of that hubris off and run away with it. And typically, he reminds me of somebody who's like the third or middle child or the youngest child, the little squirt who never really got anything. And he was very defiant and had to figure things out on his own. A fighter, right? He had to fight, but he wasn't the fighter that was out there. The world, everybody's big to him, you know. Guy's like 145 pound, 6 foot, a little over 6 foot tall, you know. But I respect him at the same time. I'm not trying to be over analytical, but I was trying to find the channel that he was blasting and putting down. But even ChatGPT couldn't find it for me. Maybe I'll go on Google and try to find it. Because actually what he did is he sold me on the idea of actually checking into the channel that he was putting down. Because that's my life. That's what I've lived, right? And you could say, oh, you chose it. Like even my son was saying that last week. Like, I was trying to let him know that there are a lot of reports of males who have been raped, right? And that they don't often come forward. And they're put in terrible situations, and it happens at an exorbitant rate and always has. And when you're talking about CP, when you're talking about all these things, satanic ritualization, satanic abuse, Temple of Set bullshit, the way that these all work together through armature, like the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, and it all leads back into this rhetorical toxic loop. Well, this guy Kevin doesn't really seem to understand that you have to go. You're forced to go into the dark regions, into the subsets. That it's not okay anymore to just stay on a narrow gauge and look past everything and go, I'm going to keep my blinders on. But in there lies the problem, right? Where you do have very narrow-minded people on YouTube. Even when people think that they're being, broadly asserting the conjecture of different people's viewpoints, most of those people want you to lose yourself. There's a very toxic element going on there. Most of them are trying to lead you to lose yourself because they're competing against everyone else. And I think Kevin is observationally, intentionally doing this. And he doesn't want to take the blame for it. And he might have had a really toxic family, and he's extended that out into the outside world, and he's trying to make it better. But I'm here to tell you, relationships don't work like that. And I think what he came up with today is a perfect example. And it's a dividing line. And it's the same thing with females. Like, don't go out and let other females toxify you, because we live in a world where the feminine notion is completely toxic. They're feeding it to you. Know who you are. Know that it's beyond a sexual display. Know that you don't need to push that button. You don't need to push that organic button. You're alive. You're here. You have the choice to be intellectual. You have the choice not to be a witch and use this the pervading witchcraft. And so this, to me, is this transformation with Mary Magdalene, where you're never going to be able to vet it. And to me, the Gospel of Mary really indemnifies, quantifies that Jesus is the pure Son that lives within us all, right? That is actually a spiritual self of a pure and perfect self. And that if you walk away with that, you do see that life does suck. You're around people who, like, that's not the religion of the world. That's not the doctrine of the world. So why is the doctrine of the world the exact opposite? To where it's saying nothing is pure. Whatever people do rationally, they did it. It doesn't matter how many demons or how much computer simulating systems or quantum computers or supercomputers were pushing them to do these CIA type operations, to do these deeds. Even if they were like remote controls and they did these deeds, they did it willingly, right? So we're pushed to do such acts. We're depraved, and we come to the only thing that we know, and they're people that we entirely can't trust. So I do say you're going to go through a dark night of the soul. You're going to go through a paranoia, and you have to turn toward your body, exercise. And if you see it, you're going to realize that if you want to survive, you're going to need to be able to walk. You're not necessarily going to have to run and hobble around like David Goggins. That's the extreme. You're not going to have to do 3,000 pull-ups, but you might have to pull yourself up with a pack on your back. You might have to do a fair bit of climbing. We're talking about survival. We're talking about the eschatological end times, right? And how many different areas they think they're right. They swear that they're right. But the reason most people swear they're right, and this is what you got to look for, is a payoff. They've been financially bolstered. And the guy at Eek Acres, he laid out, Kevin, he laid out how much money he's making. He's making a little under $100,000 a year now, just playing the way he has. And for a while, you're happy for him. But then when you start to see how he's promoting, he's blasting, it's like, oh, this is what you do when you just feel like you have a little bit of merit and a little bit of play, is you start taking out competition. There's no other reason. Like, he's trying to stand behind this notion and saying, this is toxic. This is toxic to say that men and women have toxic relationships today. And Kevin's standing antithetically, juxtaposed to that and going, no, you can have a great relationship. And I'm thinking, dude, you've never been through it. And I'm not being unipolar in my method. Like, I've never, there is a male component, obviously, to Jesus or Isis, or however you want to refer to it as, and even more so, the Zarathustra, that you have this pure and perfect son, the male component, right? And you can view that how you'd like to. You can view that through astral, a lens of astral theology, if you choose to. But just be sure you're not falling back toward divination and witchcraft, to get stuff. So at the end of the day, getting stuff and being paid off seems to be where Kevin has gone, right? And starting a movement, like, what is your movement? That's what I would say. And he's very clear about it. And at the end of the day, his movement is dogma. You have to be able to expound upon it. Oh, that's not what he's saying. I could just hear people saying that. And it's like, you're not seeing the big picture of the unfoldment and the chain that's attached to certain behaviors and certain methodology, where he would have to stay isolated where he is on his plot of land that is Bridget, I think, and I'm happy for them. I think he should keep making videos that are based around his content, but he's running out of content and he wants to keep taking in that money. And he used to kind of like, for a little while anyway, but then when you look back at his stuff, it's just not true. But for a little while, he wouldn't even come out with a video unless he had something pertinent to say, and that's the value. And then a holistic message. But you can't just never go to church, never open the Bible and say, it's God, it's the Bible. And then it's like you've never really referenced a scripture from the Bible. You've never talked about what church denomination, but there you are fundamentally, as a fundamentalist, trying to pose yourself. That's not good enough. Like today, if you're going to stand behind a belief system, even more so a faith system, that you contend is a very strong platform to the entirety of who and what you are, well, you have to come forward with it, right? There's a vetting process. Well, you can garner a huge audience of small-minded people. And so I see this and feel this boxing in, watching him now, as if his mind is just shrinking. It's going through this shrinking process. Like first there's a recruitment, and then there's just like this shrinking process where, oh, we got these idiots, these suckers, and we got them to admit that they stand behind a false ideology, a false belief system, a fundamentalist belief system that is an aphorism. It's a nuance. It doesn't even really exist. It changes through times and eras. It changes based on the science and the translation that's pervading. And at the end of the day, all they want is money. That's the Christian way. And when you combine Christianity with capitalism, that is on full display. The unsaid, unproclaimed religion is Satanism. It's antithetical. It balances Christianity out. Christianity created it, right? The Judaism. So when you get into the Merkabah and you get into the 4 cardinal, directions, but then more so you get into the 6, right, where you have this production and this egoic self, and even more so you get into the right, the white, and the left, the dark. You've got 8 points, and you begin to understand this, and then you see this when you look at law enforcement, when you look at these stars, the flag. The Star-Spangled Banner. When you start to look at it, you see the occult mechanism and you see how firmly grounded the Freemasons were, along with the Rosicrucians, in our everyday life. Who we are, how we see ourselves. And then it's sort of this snapshot, this vista, this moment in time that never really existed. Right, and it kind of gets into what Crow 777 was talking about. I think he just posted up a live that was like episode 135 or 45. It was somewhere in there, but it was just based on, really how I saw it was based on more of characterizations, how we become the phenomenon of self and a self-expression, a personality, a persona, and how that is being manipulated mechanically by way of zodiacal and calendric manipulations. And then even more so, how everything all the way down to the weather and pervading energy around us, whether or not it's going to be sunny or foggy one day, what day this clandestine group that's actually very overt and clandestine at the same time. Like you're looking at the Illuminati, the Operation Gladio, like the 1001 Club. You go on and on. It's just changing hands, exchanging information, And you're looking for some ballast, some balance of truth, and it does not exist in this world. And when you find what's missing. And that's how I came to the principles, to purity. That's what's missing. That's what's being attacked. It's obvious. It's obvious that there's nothing higher. But then you get into pure what? And it's like the pure source, where everything stems from. And that does lead into certain ideations that are establishing like a sort of Anu type of a character. But then Abraxas was soon noticed, right? It's like, yeah, it'd be nice to think that there was this pure emanation coming out. But it seems like coinciding around the same exact time, you had this computational subset that was balancing itself out and producing sacrifice and death at a high rate. You know, when you're talking about accretion, attrition, and cessation, right? So I mean, when you embrace that idea that life sucks, and that some people take this so far as to say, well, then I have to suck, right? My relationship has to suck. And so back to Kevin with Eek Acres, it's like, what will end up happening is he will become a bigger and bigger asshole, and he'll, you know, try to get his wife to become an asshole, and pretty soon they'll have a gate, a big fence around their property, and they'll become a lot like Cliff High, where they're speaking a certain doctrine, but now they're hiding from a mutual stalker. By the way, I think Cliff High is totally being taken by a younger woman. It shows all signs of abuse. I think this Heidi character made up all the stories, made up this common stalker, or expounded and exploited upon it, and appealed to Cliff High, and that she knows that he could go any day, and she's probably making him, you know, saying, why don't you put a little butter on that bread, right? And riding the rails. He doesn't see it. He doesn't know a gold digger, right? Because people say this, surely it couldn't happen to me. And he lost his wife recently, and very tragically, and he's extremely alone. And like Kevin with Eek Acres, I mean, I'm not saying that they're similar in any other way, really. Hard-headed, aging men, right? That's about the only commonality they have. But what they do tend to do is they're like railing back on the system, where they're very codependent. They're having a hard time admitting that their codependency drives them, right? They're in denial about this. And what the mantra, like, life sucks, embrace it, that I think sort of this person that included, I can't remember the name of it, I just saw the cover too, but it's you know, David Goggins was kind of a co-author or suggested or a part of this book, right? Is that you're going to be doing it alone. You're going to be taking each step alone. You're going to experience the pain alone, right? But in this, there's a shared union and a transcendence with others, where you've got true warriors. But to militarize this is to lose the entire meaning. It goes toward this nobility, and right, you get away from the main tenets of principle. In other words, you get sucked up into this militia of this false patriotism, false ideology of what the U.S. really means. And it really is, in my opinion, my interpretation is that's a popular notion. And it's kind of weird that I would see through the eyes of a lot of these people, which is pain releases you. Pain brings you back. But many people go into pain where they're like, reduce me, right? Ostracize me, kill me, destroy me. I want to die, sort of thing, as opposed to, I'm transforming. No longer are you the hand of justice and I am the evil, right? I am transcending through my own pain, through the process of pain. I create reality, right? I generate reality. And that is what's so dangerous to these initiatory programs, but even more so how they extend out into these arms, these signets, these signatures, these symbols, these sigils into these secret societies, right? That then Like to say Operation Gladio is the center, it's just another hub, it's just another junction point. But then when you back up and you see how the energy's moving, that's what people do over and over again, and it comes back to the fact that it's a mathematical language, right? It's a precision-based mathematical language, and this left-hand path has to use more precise math to initiate an end times scenario. So you're going to see it on the NASA patches. That's something else that was talked about in Crow 777, right? You're going to see it on these patches on full display. Sometimes you got to flip them around, flip them upside down, see them from multiple perspectives, compare them to others. But you have this very much this Saturnian methodology that's saying all things persona and personality are displayed, right, through this Saturn provocation. And then, even more so, how Mercury is also involved in this, and you have these lesser and greater forms of magic, Solomonic, Enochian sort of magic that's occurring here. That is like this whole, I don't know, people have been misusing this term, but like this whole spirit cooking idea, right? That was not a true term, and it was like, but it works, right? Like when you talk about spirit cooking or scrying, it's like, I'm talking about the true aspect of spirit cooking, of where you're conjuring up spirits, much like the Ouija board, right? You're conjuring up spirits, you're creating chaos magic, and you're giving it a direction. And because there's a lost religion of restoration that's not occurring here, we're all searching for that religion within ourselves that's a part of us. It's displayed through our DNA. It's displayed through the right, pure way that we want to be, that we want to regard, that we want to live, that we want to go about in our daily life and our daily struggle. And it's displayed in the very core axis, nexus of who we are, where nothing is really that nebulous or mercurial in the sense of an abstract fog, right? And people who really try to act like they're presupposing on a very solid foundation aren't really doing that. And that's where you find the fundamentalist Christians always at a loss, because in that Bible, even if they ever really opened it up and read it, there are so many contradictions found in that book, in that black book, along with everything else. All the good and the evil have to be laid out for a book to stand the test of time. Both sides have to be appealed to, because there always has to be a choice that I'm either going to go in this direction or that direction. And as you look down, you'll realize I've walked this many steps in this direction, and now I'm in the thick of it.